Hello and welcome to Pick and Drive Rugby Podcast. We're diehard rugby fans having a weekly chat about all things Aussie rugby. We're real, family-friendly and positive, so get involved.
Get involved.
Welcome to our Rugby World Cup edition. I am your host for this evening, Ando. With me is my regular weekly compatriot, Mitch Foster. How are you, mate?
Very good, very good. Got a World Cup to talk about, so it's a very exciting time as a rugby fan to be talking about the World Cup. Probably not the result that we were hoping for the Wallaroos, and they did put in a great performance. So very much looking forward to chatting through that a little bit later. But
very keen.
Yeah.
Very keen. So tonight we're doing something a bit special for you. If you're watching this in person, you would know this is a video format. So we are going to be putting out for the Rugby World Cup a video each week where we talk through and go through the results from the weekend and basically give our analysis and commentary upon that. Now, for those of you who are podcast regulars, we will continue with our regular segments like the locker room, as well as talk about other elements of the game, maybe some spicy news. Tonight, we'll be looking at the Australia A versus Japan 15 match. That will continue as an audio-only segment, but the Wallaroos and World Cup chat will always be in the video segment. So you can catch it on YouTube, will be the main platform it's hosted on, and we'll share it on all of our socials. On that point, Mitch, if people want to find us, where can they find us?
All right, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, and we're on Instagram. So do give us a like and a follow on all those platforms. Just search for Pick and Drive Rugby Podcast, and you shouldn't have too much issue finding us.
Awesome. And if you like what we do, thank you so much to the legends who have been donating on coffee.com, ko-fi.com/pick and drive rugby. We do what we do for love, not money, but every little bit counts. So thank you for all of those who have supported the pod. Now, tonight, we are going to be going through, like we said, the Wallaroos review from the weekend and a World Cup chat from the first two days of matches before we then go through the Australia A versus Japan 15 review and the locker room. So right now, let's jump into the Wallaroos and World Cup review.
Let's go.
Now we jump into the video segment, the first time that we're going through the Wallaroos and World Cup chat. Now, how good were the Wallaroos on Saturday night? It was such an exciting start and first half to the game. I don't think anybody would have expected us to be out 17-0 after the first, 20 or so minutes. How good was that start, Mitch?
Oh, it was incredible. The Wallaroos had talked about how they had taken so many learnings from playing the Black Ferns earlier this year, and how they had, really taken a lot of encouragement from particularly that last game. And that's what Em Chancellor said a few weeks ago when we spoke to her. There was a lot of belief that they could hopefully get close and get that first elusive win over the Black Ferns. And for a while there, it was looking like that might be the case. And it was unfortunate, and we will talk about it a little bit later, but those two yellow cards really did take the wind out of the sails of the Wallaroos, and it just allowed the Black Ferns too much space. And with wingers like they have,
Portia Woodman was so good. Getting the hat trick, really, really well deserved. Look, I think that what we saw was just a Wallaroos team that was full of enthusiasm, full of I don't want to go over the top, but in a way it's bravery, just a willingness to play with endeavor and physicality. So the forwards were having such a dominant impact within the first 30, 35 minutes of the game. Grace Hamilton looked like she'd taken some angry pills and was just making meters on every single one of her runs. But then with like that Arabella McKenzie quick tap and then spreading it wide for the try to Tarita was just absolutely amazing. And for Tarita to get 2 tries in her first World Cup appearance. It's her second game for the Wallaroos, I believe. Yep. And she's already scored 3 tries in 2 games. Like, she's a superstar in the making. Not there yet, unless she can just keep on scoring tries every match. That'll be wonderful. Thank you. But there were so many good news stories within that first kind of 35 minutes. And then things started to turn as we knew they would.
Well, I guess we'll talk about the Wallaroos game in specifics in just a little bit, but we first need to mention how great it is to finally have the World Cup, the Rugby World Cup 2021. It was meant to be played. COVID showed up and caused a bit of a shamble for the women's game, unfortunately. For a lot of time, it looked like this World Cup was just going to be panned and wasn't going to eventuate. And we've now got all 12 teams in New Zealand. It's finally kicked off over the weekend. We've had 2 action-packed days of the best and the highest quality of women's rugby. Some fantastic games on both days.
Yep.
the Eden Park was sold out for the Wallaroos and Black Ferns last night. So that was just a fantastic achievement in of itself to see that there is that support for the women's game. And yeah, it's so exciting to finally have this competition underway. And we will talk about the other games as well. But yeah, just wanted to briefly say how good it is to have this competition up and running. And I've, as I did say a few weeks ago on the pod, I have put my money where my mouth is, and I've purchased the Wallaroos Indigenous jersey.
Yeah,
so
good on you.
I'll have to try and get M Chance or someone of those players, Wallaroos, Wallabies, Waratahs women's team players to get a signature on this jersey in the next few weeks.
That'll be brilliant, mate. Well, one of the great parts about the World Cup is how you've got so many different teams with different styles. And we saw that across the opening weekend of the World Cup with some really, really entertaining matches where a few of the minnows, and probably Australia should be included within that because the women are still not being paid as full-time professionals at the moment as rugby players, were able to really take the game to their more fancied full-time professional opponents. And it was only kind of within a second half or the latter stages of the matches that the more heavyweight teams were able to pull away with the game. But just continuing on with the Wallaroos versus Black Ferns match, I mean, coming into the game, you've got New Zealand, who's the world rankings coming second, and the Wallaroos are seventh. The Wallaroos have never beaten the Black Ferns at all, and yet we had 3 tries to nil to take us out to a 17-0 point lead before the Black Ferns were able to start pulling it away. What do you think it was about the way in which the Wallaroos approached the game in the first half that gave them such an opportunity to take the game to the Black Ferns?
As much as we've spoken about the teams that have played this year, so the Wallaroos teams that have played the Black Ferns a few times, I think there were some inclusions in this team this week that really personnel that came in that really lifted the players. And Shani Williams is one of those players. Her input coming across from the Sevens series, we know how good she has been in the Sevens game. We were hoping that she would have a good impact on the Wallaroos, but I don't think it can be overstated how much of an impact she had. The first probably 3 or 4 touches of the ball that she got, she made at least 10, 15 meters in contact. And she was consistently getting over the game line. And even like, not just her getting the ball and trucking it up and making those meters, but she was also like getting the players around her into position and putting in big hits in defense. And you could really see that it's a pretty inexperienced Wallaroos backline that we currently have to select from. And you can understand why with the COVID situation and the amount of games they have been able to play. Having a player like Shani Williams, her experience and her just rugby knowledge and nous, really lifted the players around her, and she I think she was really instrumental in getting that early lead.
Yeah, with that point, the early lead and the early nature of the Wallaroos, I won't say dominance, but the physicality they were able to bring and then capitalizing, particularly with the Ivani Awong try on the Black Ferns' mistakes. I think partly it came down to great play and seizing the opportunities that came before them, but also there were uncharacteristic errors from the Black Ferns. Some of it was Wallaroos pressure with heavy hits in defense and a lot of scramble and basically placing the pressure back onto the Black Ferns. But I think some of it, they were a little bit overawed with the occasion.
Yeah.
And there were really uncharacteristic handling errors, which you just don't expect to see from the Black Ferns. That meant that the first half possession stats were 63-37 in favor of the Wallaroos. And I remember within the match that within the first 20 minutes, it was approximately 80-20 in favor of the Wallaroos just for possession. I'm sure territory would have been the same.
There's a stat that came up just before half time that the Black Ferns had made something like 64 or 65 tackles and the Wallaroos had made 6 or something. Like that just goes to show the amount of possession the Wallaroos had and how long New Zealand had been defending for. And as you touched on and expanding on that point around the pressure of Eden Park, like a full sold out Eden Park. And people are saying it was sold out, and there was quite a few.
No, it was sold out for the day. So what that means is the tickets for the whole day were sold, but people obviously might have just come to see either of the 2 early matches. So for the venue was sold out.
Cool. No, thanks for clarifying that, because I have seen some people comment online around, the whole sold out
venue
thing.
Was sold out. Venue.
Yeah, great, cool. But it was awesome to see that the Black Ferns or New Zealand Rugby had handed out, and I don't know what they're called, but they're those They're like these little white pom-poms on strings. It must be some sort of indigenous Maori black fern thing that they do over there. But every time they scored a try, and it wasn't until right on halftime when they actually scored that first try that the crowd has actually got up and got into it, and it was white all around the stadium as they were swinging these pom-poms around. That's like an intimidating aspect, regardless of the fact that you're playing your first game of a World Cup. You've got that many people watching you play. And I think that was a massive indicator early on, the pressure that the Black Ferns were feeling and not being on that level before, not having that many people cheering them on and there to support them. And as everyone wanted to see them do well, it really did, I think, get into their heads a little bit. And then we did see those uncharacteristic mistakes being made.
But then as the second half rolled around, the class and the quality of this New Zealand outfit definitely started to shine through. And he had key players. I mean, like, we can't go past Portia Woodman's involvement from 15. Roos Tui was also absolutely menacing every single time she got the ball. Didn't get the exact same payoffs, but 133 meters run, topping the charts for that stat. She was just immense. There were some really, really good performances. So I guess let's start with what changed in the second half, and then we're going to jump into which players stood out. So what changed? Is it too easy to simply say fitness?
I think it's too easy to say that the yellow cards really affected the Wallaroos, and no disrespect at all to the way the game was officiated. And that's something I think we've seen across both days of this opening weekend of the tournament, that the refereeing display has been great. We're not coming on finally and saying like the referees have made the wrong decision. It's so refreshing. The games flowed. The rugby did the talking. It was not about the referees, and it was fantastic to see that. But the yellow cards, I think, really, 2 yellow cards in the space of 15 seconds, 2 players down, that really gave the wingers for the Black Ferns just the opportunity to roam and to do what they can do so well. They both have sevens backgrounds. They took advantage of that 10 minutes perfectly. And I do think if the Wallaroos hadn't got those yellow cards, they're probably able to hold with the Black Ferns, and we're not seeing the score blow out as much. Don't necessarily think the Black Ferns don't win the game, but it is a big indication in saying that, that at the top level at a World Cup, when you go down 2 players, you're playing 13 against 15. It is a big ask to be able
100%.
to with a team like the Black Ferns.
100%. And let's just really briefly touch on that. So Alana Ferguson has basically put on the officials just in question a little bit, asking, so Shannon Parry, actually, no, let's go Ivania Wong. Ivania Wong is given a yellow card for knocking a ball down, potentially disrupting a attacking opportunity. So gets yellow carded for that. And then whilst they're kind of doing that officiating deliberation, the TMO rightly so, says, hi, you need to check out this high shot from gold 7, so Shannon Parry. And she had been too upright in tackle and then collected the Black Ferns player in the head with her shoulder. It was a passive kind of like soaking tackle, but it was still shot at the head. And with the way the game's officiated, fair enough, it was a yellow card, not an issue. Alana has said, well, if Shannon Parry's yellow card came prior to Ivania Wong's indiscretion, and Wong's tap down was not an active foul play really, then should both yellow cards stand, or shouldn't Wong's get cancelled out considering that Shannon Parry's was prior to it? What's your really quick, like 10-second take on that?
I think intentional knockdown and intentional act of killing the ball is considered foul play. So if you're making an action that's intentionally stopping the play, particularly in an attacking situation, that's foul play. Slap down, kicking the ball away when the opposition is trying to take the tap quickly, those sort of things, it's considered foul play. So if we're looking at both situations, we're looking at 2 instances of foul play. We're not looking at an offside. We're not looking at a tackle and not rolling away, those sorts of things. If it was a penalty or a yellow card given for repeated infringements, that's a different situation. I don't think the referee does give the yellow card in that instance, but the fact is it was an act of foul play. It stopped a scoring opportunity, not a certain opportunity of a try being scored, but it did limit the Black Ferns from continuing that attacking play. So yeah, I think the right decision was made. And I don't think we have much that we can say that we can go back and it is tricky. And people are saying that because one was after the other, then the earlier one should cancel out the later one. But they're both instances of foul play. It's the same as if a bit of foul play gets unseen and play plays on, and someone comes in and does a head high tackle afterwards. You don't not give the yellow card for the head high tackle that was later than the initial head contact. You give both, and that's what we saw.
That was a good long 10 seconds, but either way, you've been comprehensive in looking at it. So thank you, my friend. So in addition to the obvious yellow cards and the impact they had with the Black Ferns being able to run in a couple of tries because of their two-person advantage, there was also the reality that the accuracy of the Wallaroos dipped significantly in terms of the defensive effort in the second half. I mean, we gave away more penalties, 32 tackles missed compared to 12. Our tackle success percentage was 71%. It was really a poor second half performance, despite the excitement and the bravery that was shown without a shadow of a doubt in the first half. So I guess let's touch on some of the players that stood out across both teams. One person that I really just want to start with, you've already mentioned Shani Williams. I thought Emily Chancellor probably had her best game in the green and gold that she's ever had. She was immense across the time that she was in the field before getting replaced by Grace Kemp. So she was a really welcome figure both in attack and defense. Excellent runs, massive hits on D, top performance from Emily Chancellor. Yeah,
and she saved that certain try late in the second half when she came through and put a tackle on Woodman or I can't remember who it was that she tackled, but causing her to knock it on, and just the involvement that she had across the game. You could really tell that she was that sort of talismanic player, and she was up for the occasion. It was great to see her performance.
Yeah, definitely. And a player that I do want to shout out as well is Atasi Lafai as well, one of the locks. She made 19 tackles, only missing one across the entirety of the match. So she was just an absolute menace in the engine room. And pod favorite, friend of the pod, Sarah Nagama, also getting a run on start for the World Cup. She was excellent as well. Some of my concerns that I'd raised about maybe whether or not she had the kind of same level of physicality as some of our other locking options, because she does state that she prefers herself as a bit more of a mobile lock. She was excellent within the game, both in terms of the clear outs, using a bit of footwork before the contact to give herself soft shoulders to be working through. Really, really good game. But I guess just on the whole, the Wallaroos didn't have the impact from the bench that they would have wanted in terms of accuracy and energy. And also overall for the players that played the full game, they just didn't have the fitness to be able to last the Black Ferns the whole match, which is why you saw that intensity and accuracy drop off towards the end. Yeah, brilliant. Well, I guess where to from here against Scotland? Why don't we pause? Well, actually, yeah, let's go through the results from the weekend, and we'll come to that question about Scotland moving forward. Okay, because I want to talk through the Wales-Scotland result from today.
I'll quickly run through these scores,
go for it.
And then we'll have a quick chat about each one as we go. So the first game of the competition saw France get a well and dominant performance against South Africa, taking away the victory 40-5. The second game of the tournament, Fiji playing their first game at a Rugby World Cup ever, which was fantastic to see, up against the reigning it's the Rayburn Shield is the Rayburn Shield the men's one, the Utrecht Shield is the women's one. So the reigning Utrecht Shield holders, England 84-19 to England, that one, and then we saw the Wallaroos in New Zealand 41-17. Going back a little bit, the South Africa France game. What were your thoughts around this one, Ando?
Mate, this was such an incredible opening to the competition. It was a wonderful game. France got away to a really quick 3-try lead based upon some of their attacking prowess, but also the first try to Sensu was an absolute joke. The South Africans they committed way too many people to the defensive maul, and they were just overly enthusiastic, didn't defend the blind side, and she just strolled over for a try, easy as you like.
It's a bit of a trend that we kind of saw in both games, actually, the first and the second one. There was a similar try scored by England in the second game where it's that rugby knowledge and that ability to be aware on the rugby field of what's happening and where the holes are, that both France and England, which understandably, they play in a Women's Six Nations tournament, and they have for a few years now. So they are getting a lot more game time than both Fiji and South Africa. But there was a few defensive lapses where, like we just said, there's either a scrum or a maul just even a ruck right on the try line, and the winger is either committed to the breakdown or committed to the maul, and they go across untouched. So
exactly. So look, I've got a few things written down. Basically, this is the South African forward power. The power of their pack and their runners was really kind of the dominant theme of after that initial French barrage for the first kind of 15, 20 minutes. Up until then, the 67th minute, really, it was South Africa that a lot of points was not, I won't say they were dictating the game, because I mean, they were still 3 tries behind. But they were without a shadow of a doubt unsettling the French and putting a lot of pressure onto them. And they had some really dominant carriers like Sinazo Makachuli. I try my best with the names. I haven't heard them enough to have memorized them. And who was their number 7, and then Cesar Hele, the number 8, was incredible. Hele was the top run meters, carry meters of 96. The next closest with the French winger Boulard on 74. So for a number 8 to be dominant in carry meters over a winger is just immense within the game. And it really was the French pack in some ways getting bullied by the South Africans for a large portion until the French just sprang away with it. The last thing I'll quickly say is that Sanzu, the scrum half, she basically looked like in a 67th minute, she was just done with everybody else in her team, not like doing what needed to be done. And so she just took a couple of quick taps and just barged over from really close to the try line, and then got up with an angry look on her face and just walked away, just being like, that's how you do it. Come on. We should be so much further ahead. I loved it.
Yeah, that French flair, that French passion.
Yeah, the elan, the spirit of the attacking spirit of the French.
All right. Well, moving across to the results earlier today. So Sunday, the 9th of October, day 2 of the tournament, we had USA play Italy. Italy gets the win there, 22-10. We then had Japan take on Canada. 41-5 is the final score in that one. And then this afternoon, we had Wales and Scotland with a very tight game and a nail-biting finish, 18-15 to Wales.
All right, on those points, you had the USA-Italy game is great to go back and watch. If you don't have time to watch the full match, then I highly recommend the Stan Sport Mini that they had. Some really, really impressive tries. The Italian back line was just their speed and the pace in which they were able to engage the wide American defense and just cut around some forwards that maybe found themselves out on a wing out on the wide channels trying to take a bit of a breather was impressive. I didn't get to catch any of the Japan versus Canada match, but my God, the Wales-Scotland game was attritional. These were two teams who, Wales were probably not playing at their best. Scotland stepped up, and it was an attritional game that was locked at 15-15, with Scotland scoring in a 79th minute to make it 15-15, and then missing the conversion before Wales were able to regather the kickoff, bash their way up the middle of the park, earn a penalty for Scotland being offside, and then kick the clutch conversion or clutch penalty in the 85th minute to win the game. It was really, really exciting, and it makes me very much look forward to the match against Scotland next weekend.
It makes me feel a bit nervous, but we'll get to that briefly. Were there any takeaways from any of these games that you wanted to touch on before we sort of look forward to next weekend?
Yeah, look, I'm just going to quickly, if you don't mind jumping back just to the Fiji-England match, just so people have the score up. Okay, so without a doubt, this was a dominant England win. 14 tries to 3, 84-19. Claudia McDonald getting 4 tries. England dominated this game. But again, it was kind of within the second half that they just ran away when Fiji's... is this still Fijiana? Is that still the name for the Fijiana team? Because I know we used to call the Fijiana
Fijiana.
The women's.
I think Fijiana is the name for the women's team. So
the
Wallaroos is Australia, but it's a World Cup, so they're representing Fiji.
Wonderful. Okay, cool. So either way, Fiji or Fijiana, their wide defense became non-existent within the second half. But the thing that I think Wayne Smith is going to be focusing on and watching, Wayne Smith being the Black Ferns coach, by the way, is how much an up-tempo, unstructured style of game absolutely flummoxed the Red Roses, England, within the first half hour of this match. So the quick taps from penalties, the regular offload game, both of those are things that the Black Ferns have the skill set and the fitness to be able to execute probably better than Fijiana were able to do, or at least more consistently than Fijiana were able to do. And the Red Roses really had no reply to that initially until they were able to force a couple of errors, go to their line out, make them set up a couple of mauls, push over for easy dominant tries. I think New Zealand are going to be bringing that to the match against England when they likely meet either within the semis or the finals moving forward.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how across this tournament, how the styles and the plays that each team starts their sort of style with does change and warp as the tournament wears on. One of the things I wanted to say around this Fiji team was the Fijian flair that we've come to expect from the Fijiana and from the Fiji and any team playing for Fiji was very evident in this game. Mm-hmm. And it's unfortunate they haven't had as many warm-up games as a team like England or France or some of the European-based teams, because they had opportunities in that first half that I can count 3 or 4 times where they'd made a break, they'd made a line break and they were through, and they were forcing the pass. The winger or the fullbacks made the break. England is chasing in cover defense. They get tackled. They needed to go to ground with the ball, but they forced the offload, and it ends up finding hands to the England side team, which just completely turns momentum around. It just stops that pressure that they were applying. Had they gone to ground, they then got an attacking breakdown in England's 22, pick and drive a few times, and you're looking at potentially scoring a try there. There was 2 or 3 times where Fiji were just a little bit too eager to get that offload away and to keep the ball alive, when I think if we can see as they move forward in this competition, if they can start to get that awareness of when the right time to get that offload, to get the pass away, when the right time to take the tackle and go to ground, they can be a dangerous team.
Definitely. So one final thing I'll quickly say about the Scotland-Wales match just before we finish up with kind of some of our reviews. With this game, the Welsh backline was without a shadow of a doubt the more incisive and the more dangerous of the two. The thing that I think that the Wallaroos are going to struggle with both teams is the in-tight power game. I think that the Wallaroos struggle when teams kind of play it 1 out or 2 out from the ruck and just use their forwards to kind of bash it up the middle. If we can kind of, against Wales, try and maybe play with a bit more width, that might well benefit us. And the same is going to be for Scotland. I think if we try and match it with them in the forwards consistently across the whole game, we're going to struggle. Scotland definitely didn't have as much danger within their backline. So maybe trying to take it and target the wide channels might be more effective for us. Hopefully, though, we can be accurate with our execution. And yeah, just commit in the middle channels, because it's going to be a pretty tough and physical encounter this coming Saturday.
The thing, this test match, this game against Wales and Scotland has scared me about the Wallaroos coming up against both of these teams in the next 2 weeks, is that we saw that both teams were willing to hang in there and to keep applying pressure. It's not something that the Wallaroos have really we've come to know or expect from them this year, that when they get behind on the scoreboard, they find it very difficult to either stay in touch with the opposition and they often let them sort of run ahead. And that's what we saw this week against the Black Ferns. Both teams, Scotland did really well. Like Wales got out to a 15-0 lead, and Scotland did really well to sort of run them down and to keep with them and to keep applying pressures, to trust their basics, to trust the systems that they have in place. The Wallaroos are going to be tested by both of these teams. And as you said, Ando, they will be attritional battles that we probably haven't had the preparation for in the lead up to this tournament. So I'm not saying that the Wallaroos don't have a chance. I do think that we have potentially like more flair in the back line, like you were saying, players that have the ability to sort of burst the game line, to pull something out of the bag that maybe the Welsh and the Scottish don't quite have. But it is going to be a big ask for them to back that up 2 weeks in a row. But you always have big competitions in a World Cup if you want to get deep into the competition. So
exactly, there's always hope. There's always hope,
let's have a look at how the pools are looking at the end of the first weekend of competition. So Pool A sees New Zealand currently in top place. They are sitting on 5 points, We've got then Wales in second place on 4 points. Scotland got the bonus point, so they're on 1 point, with Australia unfortunately sitting at the bottom of the log on 0 points. It would have been great to come away with at least a bonus point, because the top 2 teams get out of the pool automatically. And then that doesn't mean if Australia doesn't get in the top 2 that they're completely out. There is still a chance, but it makes things a lot more difficult.
It's the top 2 from each pool, and then the 2 next best placed teams on points. And if there is a tie, then it's the most competition points scored out of the tied teams.
If we go across to Pool B, we've got Canada in first place on 5 points. We then have Italy also on 5 points, both with a win this weekend. And then USA and Japan sitting on 0 points respectively. Pool C, England in top spot on 5 points. France also on 5 points. South Africa and Fiji on no points. So if we go back, New Zealand really have a bit of an advantage at the moment in Pool A, being that they are the only one that has secured a winning bonus point. So they've got the 5 points, whereas Wales has only got the winning point, and Scotland have got the losing bonus point. So still a long way to go in this competition. Will be interesting to see how things sort of shape up in the next few weeks.
Completely agreed. So why don't we now, I think if we just quickly preview these 2 matches, we've already spoken briefly about Scotland versus Australia, what we're expecting, probably forward focus from the Scottish, and then the Wallaroos trying to maybe play with a bit more width if they can impose themselves physically upon that Scottish pack, which will be a big challenge for them. Wales versus New Zealand is going to be a cracker of a match. I think both Scotland and Wales are going to be disadvantaged by the fact that the game went into the 85th minute. And there were a couple of Scottish players that actually played the full 80 minutes. The hooker for Scotland, what was her name? Lana Skeldon. Got to try, actually. She played the full 86 minutes. And so it's going to be interesting to see whether she can back up and play and start for the next game, considering she's basically their best hooker.
And it's also interesting to note that it's a 6-day turnaround for Scotland now. So Australia has the 7 days, New Zealand has the 8 days. So out of both of these fixtures, New Zealand are the team that have the longest break between games. So it will be interesting. For those that are tuning in and wanting to watch this Saturday, 3 p.m. our time kickoff, available both of these games on Stan. Not too sure at this point whether they will be showing the second game of the the second Wallaroos game on free to air or not.
Brilliant. Well, I think, mate, we can keep on going. And we're going to jump into the locker room now. So I'll start off with the first one from Craig at the Lumber. What needs to happen to make the Wallaroos competitive consistently? And what does the ideal next 5 years look like? Canada, USA, England, New Zealand are way ahead of the pack. The USA have the recent change of tone towards college rugby leading to Rugby World Cup 32. We may well end up playing catch up in many ways. So from that, what do you think needs to happen to make the Wallaroos competitive consistently? Is it as simple as you need to pay them professionally?
I think, that's a start. And we need to create a system that's going to enable these players to develop and to get better. We currently don't really have that. The setup isn't doing the Wallaroos any favors in Australian rugby. They get selected for the Wallaroos, they then go back to their jobs, and come February, March next year, they'll get together with their super sides, and they would have been training in that time between, but they're not professional. So you can only train as much as you can without working a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. To really be competitive and to give them the biggest edge they possibly can, we need them working together as a cohesive unit in a system that's going to better their skills, better their development. And that's what we need to do. And it's going to take a lot of money, but it's what Rugby Australia really needs to start focusing on if they want us to be competitive, so especially coming around to that 2029 World Cup.
Yeah, I think so. And on that point, there's an element to which I would like Rugby Australia to take a bit of maybe, I'm not sure if it's Wallabies top-ups is the equivalent, or maybe Cricket Australia contracts that they do, where players essentially employed to Rugby Australia. And so I would love us to have maybe, let's say, 10 to 15 full-time professional contract spots available, and then a further 10 to 15 part-time contracts available that are maybe the equivalent of 15 to 20 hours a week or something like that for players. And what that then would allow is a real core group of players, and you target them specifically. You look for hooker, a lock, a number 8, a 9, 10, 15. that kind of like spine or center of the team, having all those players being professionally contracted, and then the rest of the squad, and probably a tight head as well, and then the rest of the squad having that semi-professional or part-time payment to enable them to both train consistently at a good level, but also recognize that Rugby Australia just doesn't have the money to be providing full-time professional contracts at this point for 30 plus players. So what's the best we can do? Hand pick full-time contracts and then have a wider part-time contracting system, and then making sure that you're having a couple of players from each of the franchises that are on these, so they can be also taking some of that skills, that experience, and that expectation of professionalism back into their Super Rugby setups.
And I think what we'll see as well with that system, I mentioned something similar last week or the week before when we were talking about how and what the pathway will be forward to that full professional model that's coming hopefully by 2025. I think RA said, but who knows?
That was a statement that had no roadmap for achievement and no criteria by which they were able to go into.
It was literally just that. It was a checklist. They'd said previously that we'll have an update by the World Cup this year, and so this was the update. And the update was we don't have an update, we have a dream. We hope to get there.
Our hope is to get there. And I'm like, no, you need a roadmap. And then within that roadmap, you say, here are the challenges for us achieving it, but this is what we're going to be trying to achieve, and have clarity around that. I was really disappointed by that. And it was a non-media release as well by RA. It was leaked to Caden Helmers, who's just moved up from Canberra to join the SMH team. He's not even one of the main rugby writers. He's only just joined the staff. Like, it's not even going through Georgina Robinson or Tommy Gibson or any of those.
Anyway, that's a whole nother kettle of fish that we can talk about all night. But what I want to say around the pathway through, and by making certain players, like we've said, handpick those players that are going to be professional, you can then sprinkle that talent through Super W and across the nation, really, and the teams that are available. What we currently have in Super Rugby for the men's game, Super Rugby Pacific, with the professionalism, everyone's on a professional contract. You can't really say, go to Melbourne, go to Canberra, go to Queensland, to certain players who might have a life set up in New South Wales or in Melbourne, vice versa. Whereas with the women, I think if you had a player like Emily Chancellor, and we've sort of seen that through that conversation we had with her the other week, she's going next year off her own back, not for a professional contract to England, purely taking that expense on her own to go over there, better herself, because in Australia, she'll get 5, 6, maybe 8 games of Super W. She'll go over to England. She's already getting 27 or more games in a season. And that's just what we can't offer at the moment. So if you said to a player like Emily Chancellor, we'll pay you to be a professional player, but we need you to move to Perth, I think she would say, yep, done, I'll do it. Where do I sign? Yep. And off she goes. And that's what we have.
Yeah, and if players can't do that,
that's the benefit we have.
Yep, you go. Yeah, and that makes sense.
Have.
That makes sense, because it's a reflection of their desire for professionalism and full-time play. And if that doesn't work for some players, then you say to the Super Rugby teams, all right, we're going to give you this like a scholarship, essentially. We're going to give you enough money to professionally play 2 of your best players. Let's talk about who that's going to be. And this is going to be a partnership making that decision. Anyway, let's keep going.
And that's the pathway.
We just spent 5 minutes on the one question.
I just want to say before we move off, and I will ask the next question in a sec, that's the pathway, because we do need the Super W to be a fully professional competition by 2029. We can't have the Wallaroos going to a home World Cup in 2029 where there's not a professional backing below them. It's not going to happen. There's no way that we can allow that to happen in Australia.
All right, let's fire through
Next question from Harrison Dale. What do we consider to be a positive result for the Wallaroos in Rugby World Cup, and why?
Well,
what's your...
Yeah, look, they have to, for it to be positive, the minimum has to be making the quarterfinals. That means you need to finish in the top 8, obviously, of the whole competition. I mean, there's 12 teams, so I would hope that we could be finishing in the top 8. That is currently ranked 7th.
We are currently ranked 7th.
This is true. It's gonna be hard though, because we're in a challenging pool. We're in a pool with some really good teams. But the problem is, I don't see us, with the fact that we lost without getting a bonus point, I don't see us qualifying first or second within our pool. I think that's going to be really, really challenging. So that means we're likely going to be finishing playing England, France, or the Black Ferns again as our quarterfinal opponent, because first place 8th, second place 7th, and then so on. So if we, because of our loss without a bonus point, I don't see us getting past the quarterfinals at this point in time. So positive will be minimum quarterfinals. If we can maybe have a really close result against one of those top 3 teams, that'd be impressive. But yeah, they're under the bump.
I'm gonna take the higher path here, and I don't think it's all as doom and gloom as you're saying. I think the Wallaroos have played their hardest game in the pool stages so far. They've played it. The Black Ferns are going to be the biggest competition for them. Scotland and Wales are beatable. We can have a game star that can beat them. It just depends if we can get a full 80-minute performance. The other positive that we have some real talent that wasn't involved in the 23 this week. We have the likes of Piper Duck. We have the likes of Mahalia Murphy, who didn't feature in this 23. So we know that those are players who have the ability to break games open and to score points. So it's not all as doom and gloom. I think that there is still a chance that we can get in the top 2 of the pool. I don't put it past this team with the support that they've got with the likes of Shani Williams and some of the Sevens girls that are in this setup to get into the semis. So I'm going to say that a positive result would be a semi-final berth, and we'll see if we can get there.
Yep.
Next question comes to us from, I'm just going to have to move us around because I can't actually read it. Andrew.
You go back one. You skipped one.
Hugh 96. Did any of the Wallaroos replacements push for a starting position?
Yeah, I'm going to say Laurie Kramer because of the kicking ability. We saw Arabella McKenzie unable to convert 2 of the wide tries that were scored by Tarita because, and this is not a slight on her, she didn't have the strength on her to be able to get the distance for the sideline conversions, where Laurie Kramer is capable of those, has a bit of a longer boot on her. So I'd maybe be considering taking out Pauline Paliai-Rasbale and then putting in Laurie Kramer at 15 to provide that kicking option.
That's a good chat. I don't really have anyone that's jumping out at me from the replacements. It's pushing, as we've sort of said from the performance, the impact off the bench wasn't what we were kind of hoping for and expecting. It didn't really see us progress through the great start that the starting 15 really set the platform for the Wallaroos. So outside of Laurie Kramer, I think it was a bit hard to sort of highlight anyone in particular. Andrew Ardle on Twitter asked, and he has sent in 2 questions. So thank you for getting involved, Andrew. How do we clean up defence around the ruck? For me, the game turned when New Zealand started trucking it up the middle, getting 5 to 10 metres after contact for multiple phases in a row.
Yeah, look, that's a problem that's the New South Wales Waratahs faced against Fiji and Drua. And then we also had that same problem in the games against the Black Ferns in the lead up to it, as well as the Oceania Cup. So look, the Wallaroos struggle with defense around a ruck. It's as simple as that. I think part of it just comes from fitness and sharpness and the lack of game fitness that they've had over the last 3 years. They haven't had that opportunity to develop the fitness and the response and that kind of just muscle memory and muscle movement to reload and get into the right position as quickly as they need to for international rugby. So I'm not sure if that's something that you can fix straight out. So I don't really have an answer for that.
Leads us perfectly into the second question that Andrew asked. And that is, it looked like fitness was a real issue towards the back end of the game. How do you see us managing for the whole competition? Also noticed New Zealand made replacements much earlier than we did. Do we need to manage the bench differently?
Yeah, look, in terms of the front row, both sides did it roughly the same time. So Liz Partu and Ediana Talakai both went off in the 48th minute, and then Philippa Love and Luca Connor for the Black Ferns went off at the same time. I think what might benefit us is maybe looking for some of our back row changes. But then again, Grace Hamilton only got subbed off in the 63rd minute, and she was immense. You wouldn't have taken her off any earlier, as good as Grace Kemp is, although Grace Kemp did have a couple of errors and a couple of poor moments when she came onto the field. I actually think our subs were decent in terms of the timing of their replacements. I think that we need to keep it early, probably around that 50th minute, because we don't have the legs to last the full 80. I think basically empty the bench around the 50th minute. Maybe keep one loose forward and one utility back on the bench just in case of any injuries. But yeah, empty things by the 50th minute to give us a chance to kind of maintain momentum.
Perfect. And last question comes from Able Willing New Zealand, and it's something we sort of touched on briefly just before, but is making the quarters good enough? It's a 12-team tournament, and this is saying top 8 is good enough. You could finish third in your pool, and you're still more likely to make the quarters than not. I think the goal should be semis, surely. That's what I was sort of alluding to as well previously. I think the Wallaroos should be highlighting the semis as their benchmark where they should be getting to, but with the getting into the quarterfinals is not a bad outcome either.
Yeah, and it's also just recognizing the challenges that the women have faced over the last few years. I completely agree. If we had a full-time professional team, no, making the quarters would not be good enough. I would have the expectation of going into the semis, without a doubt. And I appreciate, obviously, as a Kiwi fan, thanks for engaging. It's a little bit different because we don't have that full-time professional setup within the Australian landscape. And so I think because we're the only amateur team within our pool, because we're probably going to be facing one of the top 3 teams. Like, England are now undefeated in the last 26 games. It's a different kettle of fish that we're going to be going up against if we do end up playing them. So I think whilst we can be aspirational, we also need to be realistic about the situation and the landscape of women's rugby in Australia at this point in time.
Okay. Well, I think that brings us to a close on our first episode of Pick and Drive Rugby World Cup edition. Thank you for everyone who has gotten to this point. If you are listening to the podcast, keep listening and you will see that we do have a little bit more content coming. If you're watching us on YouTube, thank you for getting involved that way. Do leave us a comment and anything you'd like us to talk about next week. But also go and check out the podcast as well, because we're now going to talk about Australia A. And we've got some good questions coming from the fans around that and the Wallabies spring tour selection issues that have sort of highlighted themselves. Thanks everyone for getting to this point. Thanks Ando for tuning in again. We'll do it all again next week and go the Wallaroos.
Looking forward to it. Catch your team. Bye.
Bye.